Hey guys, and welcome. The Harbinger was a new character introduced to us within Halo Infinite, and it's got a lot of fans thinking, what is it, what's her purpose on the Zeta Halo ring, and how was she imprisoned there, and where the hell did she come from? The Harbinger was held in a Silex on Zeta Halo, and we can see that from the beginning of the game. She was later released by the Banished and a member of the UNSC, who was of course captured, named Combat Medic Lucas Browning. In today's video, I want to discuss exactly what the Harbinger is, where she came from, and again, some theories around what I believe that she is and what faction she's from. Again, there's a lot of things to piece together in this video, a lot of theories that have come from different people, and of course some theories for myself, and a lot that really do make some sense and have a lot of weight to them. Again, the majority of this information will probably come from DLC 1 or some different information which is fed out to us by 343, but at the moment, again, we don't have any concrete information. We're just going off what the canon was in the game, and of course, piecing things together from previous lore in the Halo game. So again, make sure you guys leave below your theories and comments down below, and of course let me know what you think the Harbinger is, and of course what you think the Endless might eventually be as well. As usual guys, make sure you go check the timestamps in the description down below to again skip to whichever parts of the video you would like to. To begin with in this video, I want to give at least a little bit of background around the Harbinger and her reason for being on the ring at the time, and of course to do this we need to listen to the 7 audio logs which are within Halo Infinite at the moment, named The Prisoner. It really gives some interesting information around the Harbinger in general and opens the door to a lot of additional theories. Take a listen and we'll be back straight after.
This is Combat Medic Lucas Browning. If you find this, you need to understand. They forced me to help them with it. Whatever it is. They brought it up from whatever's below. When it opened, God, it was something different. I've never seen anything like it. You need to believe me. It's not my fault. They called it a Silex. Sure. I call it something that should have been left well enough alone. The elites, the jackals, even the damn brutes seemed scared of what was inside. Escharum, their leader, he just stood and watched as they held my hand against it. They said only a human could open it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They held my hand against the surface. It was cold. So cold it burned. I screamed for them to stop, but then it began to open. Slowly. Pieces moved. Slid open, and then I saw her face. Oh, God, she was smiling. I am the Harbinger, she said. All that you know shall be undone. And do you know what he said? Escharum? He said, good. What more do you want with me?
Humans are so easy to break. Their flesh soft, their minds fragile. You have served Escharum well.
What was that thing?
My kind would once have called it divine.
And now?
An opportunity. On your feet, human. We need to know what else is in that little head of yours. Take him to my tower.
This is what you brought me. There's barely anything left.
It is yours to do with as you see fit.
Indeed he is. Were you treated unjustly in his tower, human? We are not so different in this. I too know intimately of injustice. To be sentenced for crimes not your own.
Please, I just want to...
Quiet. I shall talk, and you shall listen.
How long has the human been this way, Jock? A matter of days. It seems their feeble minds cannot contain the power of her words.
Closed space. Off limits. Still there. They were still there. The only ones.
You should feel honored, human. The truth has apparently set you free.
Price paid. Sentence given. We never knew. So old. So far.
Bring him to her chambers. She has more to tell him, if his mind can last.
So, to summarise to what you've just listened to in very high level, Escharum has essentially instructed the Banished to find and bring the Harbinger Silexes to the surface. However, in order for the Banished to open that Silex, they need human's touch to do it, or a Reclaimer's touch. To do this, the Banished, of course, captured a member of the UNSC who landed on the ring from the UNSC Infinity, named Lucas Browning. He placed his hands onto the freezing cold Silex, and it began to open. Seconds later, out came the Harbinger. At first weary, but came out almost smiling. "I am the Harbinger. All that you know shall be undone," with Escharum smugly responding, "Good." I'm going to be honest, the story of the Harbinger is, at the moment anyway, completely unknown, almost a mystery. We don't know how she got onto the ring or why she was imprisoned within the Silex. However, what I do know is that, of course, she would have been imprisoned for a reason, and I presume that would have been the same reason for the Endless being imprisoned. Going on to some of the things that I think the Harbinger could potentially be, just from, again, taking a step back and looking at the overall picture here. I think the Harbinger could be 1. A leader of a group or squad within the Endless, like a brute chieftain or a high-ranking elite. The Harbinger could be like an overall leader of the Endless, or like a second in command, similar to the Spartan Killers, or similar to Escharum and the Banished. Again, Atriox is the overall leader of the Banished, but Escharum stepped up to the plate when, of course, Atriox did die in quotation marks. But again, I think that potentially could be one of her roles in the game or within the faction as well, or a member of the Endless sent out to deal with difficult tasks. Again, of course, her Silex was completely different to what the Endless Silexes were, so I'm thinking that maybe she's still a part of it, because again, they were the same colour, bearing in mind as well, whereas all of the other Forerunner Silexes, Covenant and even the Flood one, were in blue, whereas these were in orange. Again, I don't know what the difference is there between that, but again, interesting to take into account. Again, make sure you leave your comments and thoughts down below of what you guys think she might be. Again, moving on to another point, and this was one that I came across on Twitter actually, and it was a really interesting point, and it made me actually do a bit of research about it, and now I'm thinking about it, damn, this makes a lot of sense. Now, as you can see on screen right now, this is the tweet. The account holder is named Katie, so make sure you go check her out on Twitter. Look at these images and tell me that they don't have a resemblance. And coming off the back of Halo 4 and Halo 5 being solely around Prometheans, this just have a bit of weight to it. Abandon, a precursor AI, turned crawlers into pseudo-organic versions of themselves in the Promises to Keep story of the Halo Fractures book. So what if the Endless are creations of the precursors that are organic forms of the Forerunner constructs or something along those lines? This would make a lot of sense as to how the Harbinger essentially teleports. She would use something called a Slipspace Translocation, which is a micro Slipspace jump. This is Forerunner technology, and this is essentially how the Knights in Halo 4 and Halo 5 would relocate themselves when you are fighting them. Really interesting, and it does make a lot of sense when thinking about it, because the Harbinger does the exact same thing. And I think it could be the explanation as to how the Harbinger can essentially anticipate your movements in the game. This would be how the Harbinger also activated the repairing of the Halo ring, as it can only really be done by a Forerunner or a Reclaimer. But of course, because she's a Reclaimer, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm just putting it out there. Again, the Endless are a faction that we really know very little about, but what we do know is that they somehow managed to survive the blast of the Halo array at the very end of the Flood Forerunner War. Nothing should survive those blasts, to put that into perspective for everyone, as it's only ever done in the event of a flood outbreak being so catastrophically bad. When the new council had found the Endless still alive after the firing of the Halo array, they were shocked, confused, and extremely concerned. Dating back to the Precursors, of course, the Forerunners were due to be wiped out after not fitting in line with the mantle of responsibility, which was guardianed by the Precursors at the time. However, before the Precursors could have the Forerunners wiped out by humanity, they learnt of their plan and decided to do the same thing to the Precursors, leaving only a few left behind. The few remaining good-willed Precursors decided to sacrifice themselves and die with their species. However, one of them did remain and was later found, who was later named the Primordial. After multiple scientists attempted to speak with the Primordial, they tried to obtain more information about the Flood and, of course, their overall purpose. The answers of the Primordial were so shocking and sinister that the scientists ended up committing suicide to prevent what was to come happened to them? This is of course where Mendicant Bias was deployed in order to interrogate the Primordial, and did so for a further 43 years. If you guys want to hear more about the Mendicant Bias story, which by the way is a fucking awesome story, I'll link the video in the description down below. Again, gives you all the details you need to know and gives you the backstory on Mendicant Bias and the full story around that. Again, it's really well worth noting and understanding what that story is if you guys don't know it already, because I feel like it's going to play a big part in the Halo Infinite DLC. But onto the full topic of today's video. Why did I recap the information around the Precursors? Well, this actually ties in massively to the reason for the Harbinger and the Endless within the canon. See, the Forerunners wiped out the Precursors because they, 1, didn't want to die, and 2, didn't believe they didn't fit the mantle. Once their species were wiped out, the Forerunners, then humanity, took over as the holders of the Mantle of Responsibility, humanity now known as Reclaimers. After the Flood Forerunner War, and finding out about the Endless, this of course worried the Forerunners, because if they can't be killed or destroyed, then if they decide that they wanted to wipe the Forerunners out, how do they fight against that? What chance do the Forerunners have against the Endless, who survived a freaking Halo blast? Not to mention as well, this is a massive concern from the side of the Forerunners if they were to get infected by the Flood. The Forerunners don't know how the Endless survived the Halo blast, so for all they know, they're absolutely invincible at this point. If the Flood infects the Endless, there could be a potential possibility that the Flood could be a permanent thing in the galaxy with no way to wipe them out. Imagine how crazy and gut-wrenching that feeling is to find out that there's a species out there that's potentially invincible, that if the Flood go ahead and infect them, it's game over. It's completely game over, and the Flood will have control of everything. So that's also a really big thing that, again, the Forerunners were probably really worried about at the time. Alongside the Flood, the Forerunners' biggest fear was not particularly a faction, but it was the feeling of not being in control. In the legendary campaign ending just after the Flood Forerunner War in the year 97,368 BCE, we hear Despondent Pyre and the Grand Edict speak about the Endless and talking about their imprisonment within the Silixes within Zeta Halo. Some of the quotes from that: "The Endless must be contained." Despondent Pyre then goes on to say, "They believe we're here to help." Help with what exactly? Did the Forerunners trick them into imprisonment at the time? Again, going on to this point, there were some really interesting points at the end of the campaign that were mentioned by the Harbinger around their imprisonment and around them just having to stand and listen whilst they were imprisoned. Again, I'll play those quotes now real quick.
Oh no.
What is it?
It's a courtroom, a prison, a place of execution. All these things together. Why?
To cover their sins, we stood silent, unable to speak as they passed judgment. We could not defend ourselves. We could not reason with them.
Something's sending a signal. Before you ask, I'm already tracking it.
Hear this, Forerunners. Your auditorium has fallen. The Endless bound. Your sins undone. Today we return.
Some more quotes as well. "Today we do what it takes to maintain order, to preserve the truth." What he means by that is the Forerunners maintaining order means that they maintaining control. They're maintaining the order or rules that they've set to make sure that they remain in control and that nothing can impact that. And of course, to make sure that if they do get infected by the Flood, that it's not going to be a catastrophe in the galaxy or the universe, because again, there's an invincible faction infected by the Flood. It just wouldn't be a good look, would it? So, and also alongside this as well, to preserve the truth that they're not the rightful holders of the Mantle of Responsibility, but the Forerunners inflicted genocide upon the Precursors at the time. Time is not a construct that we can control, and we cannot allow it to be theirs, implying that the Endless can in fact manipulate time, and we can't allow them to be able to do this. The Harbinger, of course, is rather a part of the Endless in general, or is the remnants of the Precursors in some way, or even from the remnants of the Primordial. Hear me out here. In Halo 2, the Gravemind in one of the cutscenes says this:
Now I shall talk, and you shall listen.
Now listen to the Harbinger in the audio log.
I shall talk, and you shall listen.
"I shall talk and you shall listen." She didn't just say the same thing, but she said it in the exact same way. Now, I don't think the Primordial has anything to do with this. I know the Primordial was essentially a precursor, but I think it's more along the lines of the precursors and the Harbinger rather than the Primordial. And again, going back to our previous theory around the Prometheans, I think that that's more along the lines of where we are and what the Harbinger essentially is. But saying that, again, the Primordial's mind essentially was transferred into the Flood Hive mind. So maybe there is a connection here somewhere with the Primordial, but again, it would be way too much of a coincidence for there to not be in some way. Another thing I wanted to go into is the design of the Harbinger. On her helmet, it looks as though that she has the Reclaimer symbol on there. A Reclaimer, for those that don't know, are currently the rightful holders of the Mantle of Responsibility, passed down by the Forerunners. So the Forerunners, of course, passed the mantle down to humanity, and humanity are known as Reclaimers, who, of course, are the rightful holders at the moment of the Mantle of Responsibility. This is the reason why only Reclaimers can open up Forerunner technology, and the reason why, of course, Lucas Browning could only open the Silex, again, and why the Brutes couldn't, because Lucas Browning is humanity, and humanity are the Reclaimers. Again, which is the reason why they can only activate things like the Halo firings, the Silexes, and not other species. This essentially could be how the Halo Rings repairs were activated. And again, going back to Slipspace Translocation, at the end of the game, the Chief and the Weapon enter a portal which takes them 3 days into the future. We don't know who opened the portal as of yet, but it might be offensive bias, which I think would be so freaking cool, but I think this could be what happened here. A Slipspace Translocation portal could have been opened by what we believe at the moment offensive bias, because obviously we were trying to help defeat the Harbinger and prevent the Endless from being released, so maybe he's thought, you know what, I'm going to help them get out because they could help me contain the Endless, and maybe he's transported them to a location on the map where the Endless are, but we didn't really pay much of attention to that. So in DLC 1 we may have some more information about that, but yeah, really interesting thoughts around this Slipspace Translocation. I've never really thought of it much, to be honest, but doing a bit of research and learning about what it is, and learning that this is how the knights in Halo 4 and 5 actually got around the map and teleported from one place to another. Very similar to the sort of the time travel-y sort of thing. I know that time travel isn't necessarily within Halo, but again, this also does make a lot of sense, and it's something called an accelerating chronological field. Now, this essentially is where a being or a species is placed into this field and time accelerates around it. For the being inside this chronological field, it's instant, so within a few seconds, a billion years could pass. Whereas a billion years outside of this field will, of course, go by in normal space and time. I'm thinking that now this could be also an explanation as to how they may have survived the Halo Rings firing. This same thing happened to the Primordial by the Isodidact. The Primordial's body decomposed in this time, but the mind transferred into the Flood Hive mind, which of course we now know as the Gravemind. One of the crazy thing about this too, the accelerating chronological field allows whatever or whoever inside to survive the firing of a Halo Ring. Along with the Endless's ability to be able to use Slipspace Translocation to again move around the map and essentially anticipate your movements, I believe that somehow and somewhere they were placed into one of these accelerating chronological fields to essentially survive the Halo array. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down below, and your theories of course in the comments. It'd be interesting to see exactly what everyone thinks, and especially with listening to this video and listening to a couple of the different theories in there, which of course make sense. For me, the Promethean one is the one that I think makes sense the most, especially coming off the back of 2 games that we've just had around Prometheans and the different things along those lines. I think that makes the most sense at the moment, and that's probably my go-to story at the moment as to what I believe and how I believe the connection is made between the Endless and of course the general universe of Halo. Let me know your comments down below, guys. Please do drop a like on the video if you did enjoy, and of course subscribe if you are brand new as well. Have a good rest of your day, guys. We'll see you all in the next one.